we are very blessed that Bruce Shelton happens to be around in the building. And we all know Bruce, and if you don't know him, he's our senior pastor. He's the president of our board of directors. He serves on our pastoral council, and he has done just about every job in this place, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. And we enjoy his piano and his singing. And next Sunday, on the 20th, at 4 o'clock, he's going to be speaking. Some of you know Ravi at a center at ODU with some students. And so he's going to step in and bless us with what he's going to share next week with those wonderful young students. And so, Bruce, come on up. We have opened our hearts and minds, ready to hear your wonderful message.
Thank you, Susan. Well, life is filled with surprises. So this morning I learned that Charles unfortunately could not come, so who's going to talk? Well, I have a little talk, so I had a talk planned for next week, and I'll just share this with you. It's on a topic that to me is my favorite topic, and in that sense it's probably the most important topic I could talk upon, and that is the power of prayer and meditation. And I'd like, as is my tradition, and I always like to begin by asking you to help me with this talk. And if we could just all be silent for a few moments, and let's just all tune in to God, and let's ask Holy Spirit to use me as his minister this morning to say the words that would be most helpful and inspiring to you. We could all just be quiet for a few moments. Thank you, Lord. Okay. In ancient Greece, there was a temple called the Temple of Apollo in a town called Delphi. And people from all over Greece, especially the kings and the queens, the people that had money to travel, would go to Delphi to speak to the oracle. Now, the oracle was, today we'd call it an oracle, a psychic, right? And apparently these oracles were very, very good because they kept giving such accurate information that people kept coming generation after generation for guidance. Should I marry this woman to be my queen? Will I have a son to inherit my legacy? Should we go to war against this other nation? Will we win? And people would go to Delphi to get these very important questions answered. However, when they entered the door of the Temple of Apollo, there was an inscription above the door that said, "Know thyself." Okay? And people didn't realize that the most important question they could possibly ask the oracle is, who am I? Tell me who I am. Because that's the secret to life. That's what we're all trying to really do, is to realize our full potential, realize who we actually are. The fact that we have lost our connection with the center of our being, you see, with the Christ presence within, the fact that we've lost that connection is the cause of all suffering, is the cause of any problems we've had. Suffering, as a matter of fact, is a message to us from the universe that we're off track. Bruce, you're off track, Give up that resentment, Bruce. Okay, get back on track. Forgive, love. Okay, I got it. I'm tired of suffering. See, with all this resentment, it keeps causing me to stay awake at night. And so the suffering that the anger of that resentment is causing me is actually a message to me to get back on track. Okay? But I've lost that connection with my center here that's causing me a lot of problems. So the question I'm going to ask you today is, who are you? You see? And when I've worked for years and years as a counselor, and usually we'll start off by asking somebody to establish rapport. Tell me about yourself, and a person will tell me their whole story. And so if somebody asked me, I'd say, well, I'm Bruce Shelton. I was born in Norfolk, Virginia on August 28, 1946. I was the first of 4 children born to the marriage of Betty and Larry Shelton, and my story would go on just like that, you see. We've all got a story, right? But guess what? That's just a story. It's not who we are. It's a story. It's a narrative. a very selective narrative based on our memories of what we think are the most important parts of who we are. But that's not who I am. It's not who you are, okay? So in answering that question, who are you, I find that it's really helpful to me to think in terms of a three-part model, okay? Body, mind, and soul, you know? We have a physical body, obviously, flesh and blood. Nobody's going to argue with that. We have a physical body. That's part of who I am. I have a human mind, right, which has two dimensions, thoughts and feelings. Okay, I got that. Now, a lot of people, see, can't go beyond that, you see. It's like, what is there other than this? You see, other than the human mind. I am my human mind, and I am my body. And that, of course, is not correct. There's a third part to this model, and it's actually, we can call it the spiritual self, our true self, our spiritual essence. That's actually who we are. It is not a part of who we are, it's actually who we are, okay? Subtle distinction. So another way to put this is I am a spiritual being who has a body and a mind, okay? And I'm not a body that happens to have a mind and a spirit. No, I'm a spiritual being, and you are too, that has a body and a mind. So that's a very important point. Now, going further with this question, who am I, and what is my true self? The great spiritual teachers have been giving us answers to that question now for thousands of years. One of my favorite spiritual teachers, contemporary teacher, is Eckhart Tolle. He says that within us, within you, is a reservoir of power, an inexhaustible reservoir of power, love, joy, peace, intelligence. It's all within us, okay? I'm going to repeat that. Within us is an inexhaustible reservoir of power, love, joy, peace, and intelligence, okay? In other words, everything we want is within us. Does everybody get hearing this? And I'm preaching to the choir. I'm just telling you stuff you already know, but we all need to keep reminding ourselves of the truth. Now, Jesus even put it more simply. He said, the kingdom of God is within you, okay? Kingdom of God is within you. In Hinduism, they talk about the Atman. In Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita talks about the presence of God within us. And the word the Hindus use is Atman, A-T-M-A-N. And so the Hindus are teaching presence of God is within us. When the Buddha awakened, okay, Siddhartha Gautama, when he awakened, he was given the title, right, of the Buddha. The Buddha is simply a title. And what does that mean? It means to awaken. Awaken to what? He awakened to who he truly was, okay? And in Buddhism, you know, the Buddha doesn't talk about God being out there like the other religions that we pray to God. But what really happens, the same identical thing. The Atman, the Christ presence within, is what a Buddha awakened to. You see, he awakened to his true self. So all the great spiritual teachers are talking about teaching us the same thing. And so finding our true self is what life is all about. Now, the problem is why, okay, Bruce, I hear all that, but if I'm a child of God, if I was, as it says in Genesis, I was created in the image and likeness of God, how come I don't feel like the child of God? You know, how come I'm so unhappy so often? Why am I so often filled with anxiety, anger, despair? Now, let's take a look at that question. That's a very, very profound question. What went wrong, right? Well, the greatest gift the universe has given to us is our human mind and our physical body. These are the greatest gifts. We take them for granted, but think about it for a second. With our human mind, we're able to come up with cures to diseases like polio and smallpox that people have been suffering from for thousands of years. With our human mind, we can create art and music. With our human mind, we can create the automobile, build buildings, build homes, build bridges. With our human mind, we can send astronauts out into outer space. You know, our human mind is absolutely brilliant. The problem is our human mind is it's a double-edged sword. The problem is our human mind is so brilliant that it can take over, you see. It can take over to the point that I get so lost in my head, right, that I lose my connection with my spiritual center. And that's the big dilemma. It always reminds me of that movie, 2001. You remember HAL, the computer that was a, you know, IT and artificial intelligence to the extreme, and it ran the spaceship, and it was so smart that eventually it took over and killed the host. You know, that's kind of the human mind is not. I'm not going to say the human mind is like HAL, but it's comparable, right? The human mind kind of takes over. It doesn't kill us, but it takes over. And to the point that we lose our identity. Now, let me be clear on this. I started off by saying I think our human mind is the greatest gift the universe has given to us. So the human mind's not the problem. It's what we've done with it that's the problem. Now, our work, you see, is to, you know, one way to put this is our human mind and our body make for great servants, but they make for terrible masters. So we need to realize our kingship of our kingdom, you see, take over. So our bodies and our minds are serving us rather than enslaving us. Is everybody following me, my logic on this? So everything I'm saying it works pretty well because it's all pure logic, you know. And now, how does the human mind carry out this feat? How does it do this? Well, let's take a moment to take a look at the psychology of the way our mind works. Our mind, your mind, my mind, has thousands and thousands of thoughts every day that cross the windows of our mind, okay? A lot of research has been done on this. At one point, there was a theory that there were 60,000 thoughts every day that went through our mind. And that, I don't think that theory held true, but we can say for sure thousands of thoughts cross the windows of our mind. Now, if we take a look at these thoughts, it turns out that just about all of these thoughts fall into two categories. The thoughts that go through our mind are either memories of the past, okay, or they're thoughts about the future. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that the past and the future actually do not exist, okay? The only time that really counts in life is the present moment. It's only in the present moment that we are alive. It's only in the present moment that we're breathing, that we're feeling, that our hearts are beating, that we're experiencing anything. When? Right now. So when we get lost in our thoughts about the past and our thoughts about the future, which is what we do, you see, worrying about this, worrying about that, it's taking us away from the one moment in time that really counts, which is when? Right now, okay? And that's the big problem, is the mind we have all these thoughts, they're so distracting, we get lost in them, and it takes us away from the present moment. Now, Eckhart Tolle says that 80 to 90% of these thoughts that cross our mind are repetitive, compulsive, and involuntary. We don't ask for these thoughts, they just come across our mind. Think of it like this morning when you woke up. I'll tell you in the first person. When I woke up this morning, I immediately became aware of thoughts going through my head. I didn't ask for these thoughts. They just start up, you see. Usually they're thoughts that somehow have some relevance to what's going on in my life right now. Have you ever woke up, say, anybody in this room have any resentments? The better thing is anybody doesn't have any resentments. Everybody in this room's got somebody that's done something to us that's so upsetting that it's really hard to let it go, and we hold on to it. So, and I love the way Alcoholics Anonymous puts this, you know, and one of the reasons people turn to alcohol is to self-medicate, you know. I'm so upset, and it kind of quietens this, what we call the voice in the head, all these thoughts going. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, they put a lot of importance upon how to get our life back. And so one of the things they say is that when you have a resentment, you're allowing someone else to rent real estate in your own head, okay? It's not a good thing to do. If I get a resentment towards somebody, I really don't want them to be in my head all the time. But has it ever happened to you? It's happened to me that I'll wake up 3 in the morning, go to the bathroom, come back, and I start thinking about something. A thought comes to my head. I don't ask for this thought. About something somebody said or did to me. It could have been yesterday. It could have been 10 years ago. And I can't let it go, you know. And I've been holding on to this resentment. And now I can't go back to sleep, you see. Because the thought, I get that thought, then I start ruminating. I grab it and start ruminating about it, right? Has that ever happened to you? It can be a resentment. It can be a regret. That's another good one, you know. Regrets. Everybody in this room has done things. We've all done things in the past that we regret. If only I could play the tape back and speak differently to that person, I would do it, you know. We all have that, you see. I wish I hadn't have said that. I wish I hadn't have done that. And so the regrets, we hold on to these regrets, and they kind of work away at our head, and we grab them and start, oh, God, I feel so bad about what happened that time. Regrets, resentments, and the other big problem that we all have is unresolved traumas. You know, we all have things happen to us in life that are traumatic, you see. It's hard to let it go. Some people, a lot more than others in terms of trauma. So traumas, regrets, resentments, those are the types of thoughts, you see, we have in our subconscious mind. They kind of eat away at us and are not healthy. And so they come up, take our attention, and take over, and at 3 in the morning now I can't go back to sleep, you know. And so this is the way the human mind works. Now, so what are we going to do about this? I've just put out to you a picture of our predicament, right? This is why we suffer. This is why we have so many problems in life. What are we going to do about it? Well, fortunately, the great spiritual teachers from the very beginning have been giving us teachings as to exactly how to deal with our human mind, how to find our true self, okay? And the simple answer is, all the teachers teach us is for us to have time set aside every day for the daily practice of prayer and meditation, okay? If we do, there's nothing we could possibly do that would be more important than that, than to put aside a little bit of time every day for the practice of prayer and meditation, okay? Because it's only through the practice of prayer and meditation that we can find our true self and realize our full potential. You know, as we like to say in this church, to realize the Christ consciousness within us. Now, Edgar Casey gave a great description of the difference between prayer and meditation. He said, prayer is when we talk to God. Meditation is when we listen, okay? I love that. He makes it so simple, you see. I always think in terms of we talk with our head and we listen with our heart. That's kind of helps me to understand a little bit better, too. And way back around when I was 16 years old, I was going through a really dark time in my life. And when I say dark, I mean it was a time filled with a lot of challenges, a lot of family problems and so forth. I'm not the only teenager that has family problems, but I was going through these family problems. And the pain emotional pain I was experiencing motivated me to really pray and to a little bit harder than I probably would have done had I been the captain of the football team and all the girls were chasing me, right? I would have been more interested in them than I would have been about finding God, you know. And when we open ourselves up, you see, and this could have happened to any of us. All of us, we've all been. I'm looking around this room. There's not a lot of young people here, you know. We've all been on our journey for a long time. We've all had some really hard times at one point or the other, maybe repeatedly even. And hard times can actually be a good thing. You see, psychological suffering can actually be beneficial. I always like to say this, you know, some of you have heard this before. Eckhart Tolle says that the greatest spiritual teacher in the world is not a religion. He says it's not even a spiritual teacher. What? Are you telling me, Bruce Shelton, that Jesus is not a great spiritual teacher and not the greatest spiritual teacher? Well, yes, I am, and this is why. But before you jump on me, let me finish my sentence. The greatest spiritual teacher in our lives is suffering, because suffering pressures us to think outside of the box, to break free of our mind, break free of all these regrets, resentments, worries, anxieties, depression, okay? Suffering pressures us to do that. It pressures me to want to read the teachings of Jesus and to actually listen to them. So when I'm given these teachings, now because of the pain, yeah, okay, it makes sense what Jesus is saying and what the Buddha is teaching and Krishna and so forth, okay? So suffering can be a good thing. And so I was going through a hard time when I was 16 years old, and I was given the perfect guidance. I had a great spiritual teacher, Emmett Fox. I just happened to find this book. It almost fell on my head at the bookstore, one of those things. Started reading, couldn't put it down. He wrote a book back in the 1930s called the Sermon on the Mount, and he gave an interpretation of the Sermon on the Mount that for the first time made super sense to me, okay? Because I'd been going to the Baptist church for years. I love Talbot Park Baptist Church. I love the spirit of the Baptist church. They taught me to pray. They taught me about the Bible. I mean, I'm only thankful for my experiences at the Baptist church when I was a teenager. But the theology did not talk to me. They tell me Jesus said this and said that, and it didn't make sense. But finally, I had a teacher that helped me to understand what Jesus was really saying. At least it made sense to me. And then what happened to me when I was 16 is I started, this guy Emmett Fox talked about the Church of Divine Science. And I've never heard of any church like that, There's no churches around here called the Church of Divine, because of course I'd like to go to that church. But then I was at Ward's Corner Shopping Center one day, and on my bicycle or something, and I saw a little flyer on the back, posted on the back. It said, Christian Science lecture this Saturday, 11 o'clock at the Golden Triangle Hotel. That's the old hotel the hotel that was first built that's right beside the Scope. It was a big deal back in the 60s. And so I went to this Christian Science lecture and I loved it. I loved what they were saying. It really made a lot of sense, this lecturer. So I started going to the Christian Science Church, and I did that for a year. And it was kind of funny because I'd leave the Baptist church, I'd go to the 9:30 Sunday school and 8 o'clock sing in the choir at the church service at 8 o'clock at Talbot Park, and then I'd drive right down the street, there's a few blocks to the Christian Science Church, and before I pulled into the driveway, I always looked in the rearview mirror to make sure nobody from the Baptist church was seeing me go to this church, because I didn't want to have to do explaining, what are you doing, Bruce, So I go to the Christian Science Church. And this is the takeaway. Mary Baker Eddy, founder of Christian Science, she wrote a book called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. And she recommended to all Christian scientists that you spend an hour every morning, if you can, or later in the day if necessary, reading the Bible and reading Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures and practicing prayer and meditation. Now, no one had ever suggested that to me before, that put aside a whole hour, thinking, that's a bit much, isn't it? But you know what? I'm a scientist, so I looked at all this. I do go about things scientific. I says, I'm going to do an experiment. I'll try this. What I'll do is I'll just get up a little bit early before I go to Granby High School, and I'll just put aside an hour. And I tell you, it made all the difference. I'd go to school, and that morning I felt so much better. I felt lighter, you see. Just giving myself to God for an hour, just surrendering. And I find that when I do this, that whatever I need to read, I open up books at random, like the Bible or any others. It's just what I need to hear right then. And now I've been practicing doing this for an hour a day since I was 16. I'm 76 now, so 60 years. And I can report to you that this has saved my life. It made all the difference, just putting aside some time every day to be with God. Okay. And I know an hour sounds like too much, and you do what you feel right about, you see, so maybe 10, 15 minutes a day. But you deserve this. So give yourself a gift of every day putting aside a little bit of time just to quieten your mind, you see. So the way my daily prayers go is I start off by writing, I find when I pray to God, God, thank you, I love you, da-da-da-da-da, and help me with this problem. What happens, and I'm sure this happens to you, is I'll say that, but then my mind starts drifting. All those thoughts start coming up, and I get lost in them. So what really helps me and I started this way long time ago, is I'll start writing out my prayers like I'm writing a letter to someone I dearly love. And I certainly dearly love God. So I write them out, you know. And usually I'll start off with prayers of thanksgiving. You know, thank you so much for all the good gifts. And I like to use affirmations like, I am yours, we are one. God is my light and my salvation, in whom I do trust. So writing this out and putting it in concrete, I find, is extremely helpful, okay? For one thing, when you write, it slows down your mind because you can only write but so fast, you see? So I'm real clear when I'm communicating to God. And then if something like the day before bothered me, I've been a therapist for years and years. And so I'm working with people with problems. And maybe somebody the day before, God, I feel so sorry about what they're going through, and I couldn't shake it off. Well, this is the time I shake it off. You see, I've talked to God, and the Baptist said, go to God in prayer. And see, so I write out whatever's bothering me from something that happened yesterday, you see, or 10 years ago, whatever it is. And I write it out, and it's amazing, you know. In the book of Isaiah, it gives a description of God, and it uses five words. One is wonderful, right? The second word is counselor, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, the mighty God, right? Talking about the coming of Jesus, the Christ presence within us. Now that second word, counselor, is the word I love, particularly love. They're all important. So basically, God is our counselor. You see, God's that psychiatrist that's available to us 24/7, you know, to answer. The perfect psychiatrist, though, you see, that's the difference. And so God's been my therapist for years. You see, I've been a therapist myself with people, but I've never been to any human therapist. Why would I need to do that? I've got God. And I write out issues that are concerning me, bothering me, troubling me. And I'm telling you, I'm able to process them and let them go, rather than letting them linger in my subconscious mind. Then I go to work to counsel some more people, but I still haven't got over what happened the day before. You know, how can I help other people if I'm not calm myself? The last thing I'm going to say about prayer and meditation is I appreciate your patience. It's such a wonderful thing to talk about, though, is that it's so important for me to create an altar in my home, you see. It's a really, really smart thing to do. If you look at your home, you'll notice every space in your home serves a purpose. You know, you've got the kitchen for eating and preparing food. You've got a TV room. You got a bedroom for sleeping and so forth. Where is the space you put aside in your home for God? You see, the most important thing in your life, much more important than the food you can prepare in the kitchen, right? Where's the spiritual food? So doesn't it make sense to make a little space in your home that's God's space, so to speak, you know? For years I lived in an apartment, and the only private space I had in my home was my bedroom. So I had a window, I've got a nice chair, and I made a little table, and I started putting symbols on the altar that talked to me, that reminded me of God, such as I have a family Bible that goes back to 1886 when my grandmother got married, and I have a cross, and I have a whole lot of other symbols. And over the years, my meditation space now has become really beautiful. I have stained glass windows, and I always light candles and have beautiful music. I make the space as beautiful as I possibly can. When I purchased a home with my wife Marty, we had an entire room now that's a meditation room, and it's really special. Some of you have been to my home, you know what it looks like, and it's really my healing space, you see. And so I would really recommend that you think in terms of just having a chair and a candle and a table somewhere in your room, in your wherever you live, that you don't use it for anything other than your time to be with God. Okay? So that's my talk. I appreciate your listening, and God bless you.